Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Today's webinar will be about making animated short film in Clip Studio Paint, presented by Luciannys Camacho. Before we begin the webinar, there are some housekeeping items that we'd like to go through. The webinar will be approximately 1 hour long. All attendees will be muted. Question and answer session will be during the last 15 minutes of the webinar. Attendees can ask questions in the GoToWebinar question box right away. Due to time constraints, not all questions will be answered. The webinar will be recorded. The recording will be shared on social media and will be sent via email to all registrants and attendees. The panelists are Fahim Nias, Joanna Brower, Mario Quiñones, and Luciannys Camacho. For those of you who are joining us for the very first time and have never heard about Clip Studio Paint, Clip Studio Paint is your all-in-one solution for stunning, ready-to-publish illustrations, comics, manga, and animations. Learn more at clipstudio.net/n and graphicsly.com. And with that, we'd like to pass the reins of the webinar to Luciannys and her presentation about making an animated short film in Clip Studio Paint. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Luciannys Camacho, or better known as Opal Lines Online. I'm a visual development and concept artist, but I mostly dip in all my interests into 2D media. I'm a recent grad from the School of Visual Arts in New York City in computer art, animation, and visual effects, and I did my thesis film Check Yes as a result. I've been using Clip Studio since 2017, and I decided to use Clip Studio for my thesis because I was already familiar with it, and I had already used it successfully for matte painting and compositing homework. So the reason why I decided to go with it was mostly because of the versatility and the portability of the program. I was a commuter, so I needed something that was able to go on the go with me and anything that I needed it for. So I was mostly using an iPad on the go. So while I was on the train or in a friend's dorm, I was using this program. So that being said, I will go into the first steps of the process. So up here, you'll see just some concept art, but I'll be showing you some other things as well. So just a little bit about my film. My film follows my main character, Reneliz de la Cruz, who is a Dominican-American senior in high school who wants to be a hero when she's older. However, her mom is against her attending a hero academy after graduation, so she doesn't sign off on the parental consent form because of the dangers of hero work, like dying. So Reneliz ends up proving herself to her mom and herself when a robbery occurs during a salon appointment that her mother and Reneliz is attending. So the biggest question that I get is why did you pick mixed media? And I don't know if anybody has seen it yet, but I did a live action and 2D kind of a mashup. And the reason why I did it was mostly because of budget. I didn't have a huge budget to do a live action film like I was expected to. So I wanted to do something that was budget friendly. And I wanted to stand out. So when you do an animated film for a art school, they usually show it to recruiters and stuff like that, and it's a long time. It's usually 3 hours. So I wanted to stand out somehow amongst all the people who were doing 3D animations or live action pieces. So, and also I'm a visual development artist, so I wanted to do something that showed my storytelling abilities and my costuming abilities, and being able to tell a story and a narrative through the characters and the environments that I chose. So before you do anything with a film, I recommend you write down a script. A script is super important. So when I did my script, I used here this program called Celtics. It's free. And you see here, this is my actual script that I used. I made so many different versions. I lost count. But a script is super important before you hit the storyboarding process or even making up characters. So making my story was relatively easy. It was based off of my own life, so it was pretty easy to come up with some kind of idea that was like that was also like incorporating visual effects. However, things to consider when you're making a film is, you know, how many locations, because that adds up to a lot of time. You know, character building. You don't want your characters to be flat or not appealing to the people who are like, you know, watching your film. So that's just something that you guys can do. So I will be showing you my storyboards. Well, let me show you my character designs first. So I went through different versions of my characters quite a bit. I'll show you one of my reference sheets. So right here is my final reference sheet for my main character. So I had 3 animators beneath me doing some rough animations. I myself am not an animator, but I kind of had to become one for this project. So here is an expression sheet and like just a basic, you know, drawing of my character so when I gave it to my animators, they knew what they were doing because they were having to style match me. This is also super important to have because, like, I don't know, if you just have some like little doodles of your characters and you call that an expression sheet, you're gonna have a hard time, especially if you have people helping you. And your characters are gonna evolve a lot. For me, my character didn't really change much because they were based off of actual people. But again, if you're coming up with these people from scratch, your characters will change quite a bit throughout the process and even probably till like the last day you're working on it. So I can show you what she looked like originally. She was more like this. And this was just me kind of exploring what I wanted her to look like. I ended up simplifying her, as you could probably see, because it's hard to animate something like this super hyper realistic into 4 minutes. So you could see she kind of like became a little bit chibi-ish. But ultimately it was necessary because the simpler the better. Don't over add too much, like not too many belts and stuff like that. Like she lost her bracelet and her sweater and all that stuff. And here I was planning like, you know, what her, you know, superpower was going to be. Ended up I ended up picking portal creation because I don't know, I thought that would be cool. And I kind of designed it. And I eventually, you know, in the film had somebody go into Blender and model and animate this portal. His name was Cody Winchester. He did the animations in 3D and then rendered it for it to look 2D. So that way I didn't have to go through the painstaking process of animating this portal like several times over. So just things to consider. I can show you some other character designs that I have. Already opened that one. So this is for her best friend Javier. Like this is, you know, straightforward to the point. I did a little palette there at the bottom that I didn't do for Rain, but I was basically I had this open while I was animating, and so I would color pick as I was going along. And I will show you her mother's design. So same thing. Her mother was actually based off my own mom, so it was pretty easy to come up with this concept. So like when you're making characters, also like aside from keeping them simple, try to give them things that will make them distinct from the others and like kind of give them personality. Like that's like pretty key to costuming. Like, you know, everything should have some kind of use and they don't have to be overcomplicated. So as you can probably notice that Rain and Javier have the same outfit on relatively aside from their shoes. And that's because in New York public school, they usually have like the polo khaki combo, which is like, even though it's pretty simple, it says quite a bit about where they're from and where they're located. And then for the mother, you know, in the Dominican Republic and people who from the Dominican Republic who moved to New York City, a lot of them go to the salon and have rollers in their hair. So I was just like, okay, I'll just do that. Like that's a pretty typical, you know, thing of somebody of her demographic and age to do. So those are things you should consider when, you know, making characters and such. Now I will move into some storyboards. Let me close these. So I made 7 versions of this storyboard, but I'll only show you like 1 version or probably like 2. But yeah, it was quite the excruciating process. So I ran through 7 versions primarily because you know, I did this during school. So every other week, I would present like my newest storyboard as I was like kind of discovering and exploring my concept and how I wanted to execute these things. And I'm probably not the best example of a storyboarder because they shouldn't be this detailed because you kind of get too attached to them. So don't do what I did. Don't put in a ton of detail into your storyboards because like they shouldn't be things that you should be attached to. Storyboards are meant to be just done very quickly and just to get the point across, and they should be very clear. They should be like a comic book, and you know, I know some people have tendencies to over illustrate and stuff like that. So this was I believe I just looked up storyboard template and then this is what they gave me. So I thought this was pretty nice. And like the smaller squares kind of made me not feel like, you know, what I was doing was too precious because I couldn't cram too much. So try not to zoom in at 400%. And I think I did this with the darker pencil brush, and I just kind of went to town and did what I had to do. So I'll just kind of sift through these. Yeah, so with storyboards, when you're doing actions and stuff like that, try to make it as clear as possible for your sake and for anyone else who's working with you. Because if the action is not clear and you're only doing like, I don't know, like every other 3 actions, it's going to be really difficult for you to then like kind of visualize the movements. And for me, I was doing a half live action, half animated short, so I had to know, you know, how the camera moves are going to happen because I actually eventually had to go on set and replicate my storyboards. So not to say that you will do that yourself, but that's something to consider. And yeah, so storyboards are pretty key, especially if you are, say, working a small studio. You would probably know that. So yeah, this is just me kind of planning out what is what. I probably should have added some shading. Again, like this was my first time ever doing it, so please learn from me. I could show you some old ones as well. Let's see. So this is like I think this was my 6th try. This one was a little bit better. See, there's like actual gray shading in certain parts, so you know who's in the foreground, like and then the background and stuff like that. Just helpful things to have when you're like actually in the animating phase and you know, trying to see what the heck is happening. So, you know, once this is all done and you have all your storyboards, you can go ahead and cut these out into like the individual squares and name them properly. And that's another thing. Please name your stuff because things get really out of hand really quickly. Once that's all done and you cut those out, you can bring them into any editing program that you have for videos. That could, I think I did this in Adobe Premiere. And you would get like somewhat of an animatic. So an animatic is kind of like your first cut. So let's see. So I had this animatic for the, I believe it was my 5th or 6th go around. So I'll just play it just really briefly so you can see what would happen. So you kind of like move the frames in a way where it's kind of like an animation just with no in-betweens. So that way you kind of have a sense for timing and just how things are flowing, because it's really easy to lose track of what you're doing when you're storyboarding. So every so often, just give yourself a day or two and like cut an animatic together and see if what you're doing is making sense. That way you actually have some kind of like quantitative way to kind of see your progress. Because I know for sure, personally, I get kind of lost in what I'm doing. And I kind of like then cut it together at the end and I'm like, this probably doesn't work. So then I have to return to the storyboards, which is why I had like as much as 7 versions. And just so you know how many it went into one storyboard, I would say like 112 panels is about how much one storyboard had. So these things do take some time, but they're worth putting the trouble into because pre-production is pretty important. So after animatics were done, I went in and said, okay, well, how do I want this to look eventually? Like what's the final style? So then you do things called style frames, which is basically a test of your look before you even attempt to do anything, just so you have a cohesive thought of what you want your color palette to be and such like that. So this was like my main style frame that I would show people when I would try to like want to convey what my idea was. So I knew I wanted it to be like live action with animation. I don't know if any of you watch The Amazing World of Gumball much or at all, but that's what my main inspiration was for look and style. I really liked it. I thought it was unique, and I liked how the show kind of meshed all these mediums together, and it really wasn't offensive to the eye. It was actually worked really well. So I got like, I think this was like a random stock photo from a bodega in New York or something, or the dollar store. And I just slapped my characters on it and like kind of try to give them personality so I myself could see what I was doing. And then others who were looking at my stuff, and my professors, could understand what my vision was. Here's some other stuff that I did. This one didn't have like an actual background, but this is more me trying to figure out who my character was and what her personality was, because that's pretty important when making a story. Let's see. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that bit. And then you don't have to do this if you're doing like a whole animated piece, but this was required of me. They asked us to do a previs. So basically a previs is like, well, a pre-visualization of what your thesis or what your film will be. So I went out and shot with, I believe this was with a Blackmagic Pocket 4K camera. And I went out and I just shot my shots, tested it out. And it was, I think, the middle of February. And my film was supposed to take place in, I believe, September. So it was a pretty rough thing, but it was eventually helped me out because I could actually visually see what I wanted to do. So I actually went to the locations that I wanted to film at, and I just kind of softly did my entire thesis. Again, you don't have to do this, but if you think this would be beneficial for you to clear up your vision of your film, you should probably do that. And all these like drawings you see was in Clip Studio that I just eventually exported and loaded into a After Effects. So with that being said, after your previs and animatic is done, what I ended up doing was that I went and contacted DPs, which are directors of photography, to shoot my live action, well, we call them plates, or like, but I guess most people know them as videos. So live action videos or plates or backgrounds. And I have a few pictures from shooting. So let me load these in. Yeah, so this was, I believe, on day one of shooting. And because I was on a budget and I, was lucky enough to live in the area that I wanted to shoot in, this was actually my room in New York that I emptied out. And I like kind of set it up in such a way for my film to occur. And I had a actress who is sitting here behind the camera. And then here's my DP, and then there's me, very sweaty because it was the middle of August. I got an actress and an actor for the mother character, my main character, and her best friend, who were the approximately the same height and build, so that when I would shoot these live action backgrounds, I not only had a point of reference for where the characters should be and how long the dialogue would actually take. The animators also had something to basically rotoscope off of, and they didn't have to do much guesswork. So they knew exactly how large or how small and what perspective my characters had to be in, because I already had those actors in there. So basically what I would do is that for one shot that I wanted to do is that I would take one take with the actress in it doing her stuff, and then we would take another one without her in it at the same length of time. So if you want to do something like I did, that's how I executed that. So this was a voice recording and stuff like that. This was my voice actor for Javier. He's actually 15, very talented. and from the area, because the accent or like kind of the tone of voice was pretty important for me. Record your dialogue first, don't do it the other way around. I'm pretty sure it's like a no-brainer for some people, but I did encounter a couple people while during my process that thought you animated first, then did the voices. That is not how you do it. You animate to the voices. And this was in school, hence the very fancy tech. So this was also that same day in the really hot apartment. Also same day. And then this was also in the salon for the salon scene in my thesis. And you can just see like the trash bags on the ceiling because we're trying to block out the light because it was really, really strong. And then we had like some cool fancy lighting with filters to make it look more comic booky and whatnot. Let me close these out. And then here, for people on a budget, this might look a little funny, but because of the coronavirus, it kind of hit in a really pivotal moment of my thing. So I had to record my own audio at home. I ordered a mic, and I needed blow dryer noises, so I just turned on a blow dryer on and off to a microphone, and then I recorded it into GarageBand, and it worked. So you don't need fancy stuff for everything. So let me close these out. Okay. So now that that's done, I will go into the animations and then one matte painting that I did because there was quite a bit. So actually, let me just open these two up. So I did a ton of matte paintings to do like that 2D live action effect. So you'll see here, if you remember the girl sitting at the desk, this is basically what the final output was. So like I'll like hide some layers so you can see like what I did, adding like shadows and stuff like that and all that jazz, adding posters. So I literally didn't have to do this in After Effects or like in Composite in After Effects. I just did a straight in Clip and like did a crap ton of like multiply and overlays because I didn't want to be bothered with doing the compositing in After Effects or Nuke because my computer was very slow. And same deal here, like literally just actual drawings that I like lit in Clip Studio. Close these out. Do not save. And then some animations, and forgive me, I'm using Pro. I did most of my animations in my iPad, which had EX on it. So if it does like some weird error, it's not anything to do with the animation itself. So here I have this one bit where Javier is like kind of bouncing a basketball, and let me just play it so you see it. So very short sequence. One of my animators kind of rough animated it, and then I like went over and did all like the pretty work, like the lines and the colors. And the ball is actually just a black blob that I put on multiply, so I had a guide for when I used the 3D ball that I used in the film. I had like some kind of a guide, so I wasn't going in blind. So let me pause this so you can see how I did this. So this is playing at 24 frames per second, which is like the basic standard for animations. And it's the less tedious way you can do it. I know like people sometimes do it in 30. I wouldn't do that because it's a ton of time. And stylistically speaking, I didn't want to do it that way. So I just picked 24 frames per second. And when you do these animations, you usually go to like a file new, and then this window will pop up. And then you hit here, the little window here where it says animation. And then they have already presets for you, which is great. I did it in 1920 by 1080, and then it'll fix itself. Resolution, I did it in 72, no, not 72, 144 DPI, but it's not really important because it's for the web. DPI is mostly for printing. And then here you like kind of name your timeline. So I just named it Check Yes, which is the title of my film. Frame rate, you pick it here. So you have a ton of options. Scene number, looks like whatever scene I was in. So this was scene 1, and then this was shot 22. And then you would just hit OK, and then you would get this. So I usually I was actually more working in the layers panel than here. So I was a complete newbie to animation. So I literally just went off what I knew about illustration and applied it to Clip Studio. I mean, not Clip Studio, to like the animation process. So here Let me hide this so you can see it. Let's move more here. So you have the ball, and the ball was like the lowermost layer. So then you see I kind of like did his hand so it would accommodate the ball that would be added later. So see that. And then this is his base color layer, which I just kind of, let me hide the clipping layer so you see it. So this is just me applying base color, nothing too crazy. And then I did a clipping layer, so I didn't have to stain the lines because I'm really bad at that, shockingly enough. And you turn them on, and then there's all the shadows. And then you have, turn this off, you have the lines. So I used the G pen, it was great. So I did the lines here and I cleaned it up. And then here, I have this habit of coloring my lines, like the internal ones. So I don't color the ones that are on the outside. I only color in the ones that are on the inside. That's an optional thing you can do. That's just a personal thing that I do because I think it kind of brings it all together. But just be warned, it's a pretty tedious thing to do. So please make sure you have enough time to do that. Now, I will show you something that's a little bit more involved with two characters in it. So here, this is the point where her mom kind of barges in on her in her bedroom, and I'll play it for you guys so you can see it in its full glory. So here she would be coming out of a door. Once I would apply the live action plate underneath of it. So I'm pretty sure you're seeing all the gradients in there and you're probably like, what were you thinking? Trust me, I was thinking the same thing. So I have two separate folders for Rain and then Giselle, which is the name of her mom. And then I'll just show you Rain because she's the one in frame right now. So same concept, base color, shadows, lines, and then the colors for the lines. Now, so I know gradients is a problem for some people. So what I ended up doing was that I would make sure that the kind of like the shape of her hair was very like not abstract and like not super organic. It was basically one solid shape. And then I would just magic wand it and then take the gradient tool, pick the darkest color of her hair, and then like go like kind of like extend it forward, and then it would just fill it in for me. Because like at first I was kind of going brute force with the airbrush, and it was coming out with inconsistent results. So please use the gradient tool. It's so much better and you will have more consistent, cleaner results. And just a small tip for people who are working and like, you know, to protect your eyes, please set the background to like a gray like this or neutral gray. It'll save your eyes and you're more likely to see if you went out of the lines. So with that being said, oh, and then of course I ordered them in the order that, you know, they're in. So Giselle is like behind Rain, so therefore you'll see like you order that in that fashion. So say you're done and you want to export, you would go to export animation and then you would hide the backgrounds and so it's transparent, and then you would hide, and like I want to say that you should export your characters individually and not together. That way when you go into After Effects and you want to add like say a blur or like a glow, you need to like you want to have them separate so it's not affecting the entire thing. So you would go to export animation for one character and make sure everything else is hidden, and then you would go to, what I did was image sequence, so you have that transparency. And then I can't do it here, but it will ask you if, like what file type you want it to be in, and you would select PNGs because PNGs have alphas, which is basically what you consider transparency, so that when you bring it into any After Effects or Premiere, it'll have no background. So you can put it wherever you want. You don't have to worry about doing any like chroma keying or like luma keying to get the background out. So now I will show you how I have it in After Effects, just very briefly. So this is like one of my projects. So let me see if it'll play for you guys. In After Effects, they have something called like the playback quality. It'll take longer if it's on full or auto. Put it to like a third. You don't really need a ton of quality unless you're doing some precise work. And this is what it looks like when it's overlaid over the background. And once it caches, I'll show you the actual order of things. So see, like, that's happening. So when you have it exported as an image sequence, After Effects will like kind of show you this little icon, which shows you it's like literally a series of images. So my portal was a series of images like exported from I believe Blender, yeah. And it plays pretty smoothly. The reason why you want to do an image sequence is because you're less likely to have the video get corrupted once it's in the program itself. And you know, if one frame gets corrupted, you don't lose the entirety of the video and have to re-render. So I'll just show you the order of things. So this is just a regular live action plate, nothing happening really. Then I put the portal in, and then I added one of the animations given to me, and see, there's no background on it, it's just there hanging out. And then I added a glow effect to the portal to give like some kind of light, and then another portal over here because the portal's like the other end of the portal is like supposed to be reopening on the other side. So then now that you exported the characters individually, you can do effects to it individually without affecting anything else. So I can open up my effects panel, and I use Lumetri color, which is like basically just like a color correction thing. So I can like control the exposure individually and not affect anything else. So, yep, same concept for a lot of these. I think the only time I had to do some brute force was like doing shadow, so I'd have to like kind of trace where her hair was, and then, you know, do that, make sure it's like not weird looking. So you can do some pretty cool stuff in like After Effects with your animation. So like I think I would say like 30% of the heavy lifting for the animations making it look good was in After Effects, which luckily it doesn't take a lot of time. So, you know, the result came out pretty good in my opinion. So I guess one last thing that I will show you before opening up to questions, because I got through this a little quicker than I thought. It's this thing. So if you remember in the beginning, I have this like kind of top-down shot where it starts at the top here and then ends here at the bottom where the entirety of the street is shown. So what I ended up doing was that I have a Mac, so I don't know if this is the same for PC. I would get the first frame of the shot, copy that, then go to like say like a frame in the middle of the shot, copy that. I think you would like literally like press copy while watching the video, and then the last frame I would copy that, and then I brought it into Clip, and then I basically kind of painted the edges together to make one like I guess panorama of the shot. So then I went in with my 2D assets, which I should probably show you. So here are like my individual 2D assets, like see that was like that sticker in her room, one of the posters in the room, stuff like that, shoes. So keep that in mind. Brought those in here, did all I needed to do to that, and then I would export it as a Photoshop file because After Effects can't read clip files. Bring it into After Effects as a Photoshop file with layers. So retain layer sizes, I believe, is what it will ask you to do. And then you can, and it already be in place and already in the perspective that you needed to do, and you don't have to do that so much stuff in After Effects or in Nuke if you decide to use Nuke. And yeah, like it's already there for you. You don't have to do anything crazy. Like, you know, everything's in place. And then so when you open it up, everything will be in the perspective that you need it to be in. And then that way you can kind of plan stuff like that. So, you know, just things to consider. That you can do a lot of planning in Clip for like films, not only 2D, but even live action, because I have done quite a bit of matte paintings for live action pieces in Clip Studio. And you can even do compositing as I show. And yeah, I think that's all I have to show.
Okay. Do you want to think about it again? If you still have anything
No,
else? Okay.
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, we still have quite a bit of time, so I'm sure people would like to know, like, if you can just very roughly show how you use the animation feature in Clip Studio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like on an example you've shown. Yeah, I thought about that. That scene might be
Yeah.
good.
Okay. So is there anything specific or like?
Maybe just the setup of the scene. So how you start
Okay.
out creating a file.
Yeah. So again, because I'm like on this weird version of it, but you would go to just new, and you would go hit this little video button over here or icon, and then it's gonna open this panel up. And here they already have presets for you. So when you make animations, you either do it in 720 or 1080, which is like the basic HD sizes. Work in 1080 because like that's pretty standard. And then it'll do those things for you. So see, the width is 1920 and the height is 1080. Resolution doesn't really matter because your animation is for the web and you're not printing it. But I was working at 144 DPI. And it's going to switch to custom because you're not using what it had already preset for you, but it doesn't really matter. In the timeline name, you just put the name of your film or your project. Frame rate, I picked 24 because that's where I wanted to work at, which is pretty basic for animations, but you can also do 30 or 60, but be warned 30 or 60 is a lot of work because you have more frames per second. Scene number, this is scene number. So this was from my first scene, so I had it set as a 1. Shot number was shot 22. I think I had a total of 30 something shots for my first scene, so I just put it as 22, and it'll like pre-name it for you when you export it for you. So it'll say, for example, it'll say check yes, scene number 1 dash shot number 2 dash, and then whatever you want to name it afterward. If you want to name it like a specific character, say if you're exporting it and say, okay, this is the timeline for this character, then you can do so when you're naming it, adding that dash after it. But this is pretty basic. I'm not an animator, like I said. I had people helping me animate, but I was the one doing the color lines and the timing. So this is how I understood it, and it worked out pretty well for me. It's pretty beginner, but I got some pretty good results out of just doing what I had just shown you. And the animation timelines pretty much work in the same order as like you would do an illustration. So like obviously I didn't start out with the color or anything. I kind of started out like, let me hide this, like this. So I just did the lines first. Then I would do the base color, then the shadow, and then the line color, and then I did the ball. And then it won't play here because this is the pro, but this is like the original rough animation sketch that I had, and I was just going over it and like more clearly defining the shapes of like say his face and his head. Like he didn't have eyes there, but like here he has eyes, so you know you're adding those things in. Is there any like more like questions, Joanna?
Oh yeah. So you talked a little about the character design at the beginning. And there was a question, it's like, do you have any tips on how to flesh out a character for a story? So how important is the design and the background story of a character for what they eventually look like?
Okay, so let me pull it up. So like this one. Okay, so this was like one of the first ones that I did, because like I do concept art aside from this. So their environment, where they're from, and their backstory is actually pretty important, or if not the most important thing to making a character. Because like for example, if you're doing like a Western animation or something, like they're doing cowboys, and like say your character lives in a very dusty place, like there's a lot of like kick up of the soil and it's very dry, but like your character looks pretty like hydrated and like not all that gruff, it's gonna be confusing because it's not matching up to their environment. Because like, you know, believe it or not, like us as people, where we live and our environment and our conditions affects what we look like and how we behave and our personality, and what we do and what we wear is a reflection of those traits. So for example, my character of Rain and Javier, they're from New York City in Wood. It's a very urban place. There's a lot of, you know, There's basketball. A lot of the kids are really into like sneaker fashion, so I made sure that like, the sneakers were looking good. The uniforms were accurate to the area. Like I even looked up like what backpacks they were wearing. Like I wanted it to be as accurate as possible, because when you're doing like a piece like I did that was culturally based, you want it to be as accurate as possible to what they do in real life. And of course you have creative leeway. It doesn't have to be 100% correct, but you want to make sure that that base is there. I mean, like even the hairstyles, like this is like the hairstyle that Javier has is a hairstyle that my brother was wearing at the time when I was making this film a year and a half ago. So, when you're making a character, it should reflect their personality, and the environment that they're from.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, you talked about the storyboard in
Mhm.
the beginning. Could you open that file again if you have it?
Mhm. Give me one moment. Okay, open that up. Okay, cool.
Yeah, so people were really interested in how you set up the layer structure. You talked about not having to like going too much into detail, but like your
Mhm.
backgrounds look pretty detailed and your
Yeah,
drawings are very detailed. Can you show how you went about like creating those?
yeah. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better. So here you probably recognize this little building from the previous that I showed. Like this is an actual building. So to save you guys the trouble of like drawing buildings like over and over again, what my professor suggested to me while I was doing this, because like I'm an illustrator, so I had the habit of wanting to be super detailed, which is what I ended up doing in this. Please don't do what I did. But with this, I think was like more on the simpler end, where the building was recognizable. What I did was that I literally just looked up on Google. I forget what the name of this building is, but I looked up the name of the building. I literally just lowered the transparency on it, and then like I just traced over it. So when you're doing storyboards, tracing is okay when it comes to buildings, and like backgrounds and stuff like that. And always save it on a separate layer like this, because I had this saved on a separate layer. It's not there anymore because I like got rid of it, but like I saved this on a separate layer, and then whenever I needed the background, I would just copy and paste it back into the layer I'm working on, and then I would just draw over top of it, so I wasn't constantly drawing it. So it's, as you can see, like the building is like almost identical in every frame, because I was just copy and pasting it back in there. So in that regard, when you're doing like stuff like wipes and swipes, like here, like the people kind of walk past and then like kind of reveals these people playing dominoes. Like what I would do is that I would have the shot that's already centered. Let me hide this really quickly. So this shot here, this is centered, like there's no movement, a camera movement happening. So I would have this saved on another layer, and then I would just like copy and paste it just a little bit, like moves to the right, so it's like has this illusion of the camera moving in the storyboard. When you're doing it in After Effects, you can obviously just keyframe it to move, but like when you're doing storyboards, just have your shot that you're adding camera moves to like on a separate layer, so that you can bring it back in and just move it slightly so you understand what the camera move you're doing is on paper. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, I think so because
Yeah.
you showed the different layers and how you
Yeah.
worked on this.
Mhm.
So do you have any tips to keep it simple when you
Yeah.
draw?
Mhm. So, if you're like super hyper detailed like I am, what I like to do is that I like to kind of go for more of a silhouette and like more of motion, rather than like, I don't know, like taking a lot of time drawing hair on the person or something. Like let me pull up this one specific one that I have in mind. Let's see. Where is it? Oh. So like this one. Not a lot of lines, I'm gonna be honest. I just tried to I was more focused on the silhouette of what I was doing versus, and like how clear the action was versus like how detailed it is. Like, so if you look at these drawings, like I think this guy barely has eyes. So like it's like, don't like be too focused on like, I don't know, like they don't see, like make sure like the expression is clear, but like kind of keep the line amount to a minimum. And also, what I ended up doing is I was taking a figure drawing class at the same time I was doing thesis. So in figure drawing, they tell you like, hey, try to use as minimal lines as possible and keep your pencil on the paper, well, in this case on your tablet, as much as possible. And I kind of like that tip, like try not to kind of do so many lines, like try to do one fluid line to kind of, you know, express what you want to do. So like, yeah, here, like, yeah, like this was very basic, like kind of like trying to break it down to simple shapes and forms so that like, you know, if you have people working with you, they're like, oh yeah, that's so and so, oh yeah, this is this character, because ultimately you just want people to know the difference between the characters, and like, you know, you don't want to do like a very elaborate composite sketch of them for every frame, because then it's going to take forever.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Another technical thing, the question that we got is you have the composites with your characters in the real environment, and it seems you have some effects laid over it, like the pop art effect and like the screen tone like effect. Can you show how you created those?
Yeah, so hold on, let me open one of them. Give me 1 second. I'll do like the bedroom one. So let me zoom in. So you can probably see like the little they're like the screen tones and like the dots. Like I didn't know they were called screen tones at the time. I just called them dots. But what I would do for those is that I didn't have, like at the time I wasn't aware that there was like an asset brush to do these automatically. So if I knew that then, I probably would have used the brush. But I actually just looked up on Google. They have like these transparent overlays of just like dots, and I just saved them, and then I would bring them in, rasterize them, and then overlay them to what I want, and then I would just erase where they were like overlapping. So like here for this like lamp, I would just like erase around the curvature of the lamp, and then to make it look like it's interacting with the light, what I would do is I would I basically just kind of went between overlay and multiply a lot, or like soft light. Soft light was my favorite one. And then I would just lower the opacity to like 25, or like here I have like for 83. Like it was just basically to lower the opacity while on overlay to make and to a point where like I was okay with what it looked like. And then of course, if it's a little too strong still, what I would do is I would go with the airbrush, have it like on like the little checkerboard transparency thing, and then I would just like make it like kind of big, and then lower the brush density to as low as I possibly could, and then I would just go over it and to soften it manually where I wanted it to. So like here you see it's kind of disappearing. That's where I went with the airbrush and stuff like that. So it was pretty simple. It was just overlaying some stuff, some like PNGs, and then putting it where I wanted it, lowering the opacity on multiply or overlay or soft light. Soft light was what I used for the real life objects. Multiply was what I used for anything that I made in 2D. And then like, you know, just finessing it to the point where I like liked it.
Okay. So this was definitely a stylistic choice on your end. Like, how did you come up with the idea of using this kind of technique?
It was, believe it or not, I think, so I started this thesis process in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe Spider-Verse had just come out that same time. And I went to go watch it over my winter break, which was like during my storyboarding phase. And I watched it and I was like, that's cool. I want to do that. So I like, of course, that was a 3D film. So I was just like, well, they use a lot of screen tones in a lot of places. I believe they actually built it into the textures of the models themselves. So it's just like my equivalent of like building in my textures was like basically getting screen tones from the internet and like applying them in places where you would typically want to see them in a real comic book. So a lot of it was me looking at comic books from all points of time and seeing where they place screen tones, and that's where I would place them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that film was very, very good. I think it probably influenced a lot of students at that time.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have any other influences that helped you develop your art style and your essentially your oh my god, now I'm losing my words. Your wish to become an making this film essentially, but also general, just your art style.
Oh, okay. So for the film itself was like, of course, like Spider-Verse, like I just mentioned. Amazing World of Gumball was like my favorite show on TV at the time, and I hardly watched TV. And like the show was very like mixed media, so I was like, ooh, that's a cool idea. I had just watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World for the first time in 2018, which is pretty late, but like I loved the way the transitions were, like kind of like the whole entire like video game mashed up with like actual people. Like I love that concept, so I kind of did it like that. That's where I got my idea of like the title cards. Suicide Squad and Birds of Prey was a big one as well, with their like kind of like 2D integration. And My Hero Academia was like a huge one for the plot itself. I was just watching season 2 while this was happening, and like I was super invested. So I'm like, I love superhero stuff, and I like the way My Hero kind of approached it. So I was like, oh, that'd be cool, but like for I guess like for like a New York kind of like style or something. And as in general, like for my general art style, my inspirations was the comic book artist Jen Bartel, Amanda Shank, and I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she goes by Baro-chan on Twitter, I believe. Those three are like my main influences, and like their art is currently on my wall.
Are you active on any other platforms, or are you planning to be?
I just made a TikTok the other day. But it's, yeah, Opal Lines is on TikTok, but I'm have my YouTube, have my Instagram, have my Twitter. I kind of use my Tumblr, not really. All by the same name, by the way. But I'm planning to go to Webtoon soon. I'm like planning my comic, making the comic, kind of picking up from when this film left off. But I don't really know when that's going to come out. Probably towards the end of the summer. But that's pretty much all the social media I have right now.
Are you working on anything in particular right now?
So for the comic itself, I'm currently like writing with like I have a writer. We're like kind of working together writing that, and then I'm also like I'm in the process of figuring out what the uniforms are gonna look like. So I love that because I'm like really big on costuming. So I'm like kind of working on the costuming for that, and then aside for that, I'm just like freelancing like random little things here and there for people who hire me, and I don't know, like building my computer after that.
How I think that's probably interesting for a lot of people. So you made your thesis project, and you put probably a lot of extra hours in besides your studies. So can you give like a bit of an overview of like how that worked for you?
Yeah, so I don't know how familiar anybody is about with SVA, but SVA is kind of well known for having a really heavy workload, especially if you're in the computer arts department. So I was already drowning in homework when this was happening, and I was taking some studio classes as well, so it was pretty difficult, and I also commute about an hour and a half. So basically what I was doing was that like a typical day for me would be like getting up at like 7 in the morning, getting ready for school, jumping on the train. Sometimes it would be New Jersey Transit, sometimes it would be the metro, like the New York metro system. And I would just work on the subway or the train. And then I would be in class, and if it was like a humanities class, like forgive me for saying this, to any of my humanities teachers, but like while they were talking, I would work on my my thesis film on my iPad, and I would also like during breaks I would work and do that. Like so I was doing like 18-hour work days like in between classes, so it was pretty intense. Plus we had like a deadline, so yeah.
We got another question regarding like the animators and the actors. How did you find them? Did you just take your classmates, or did you ask anyone in particular for that?
So for the actors themselves, I went on a website called Backstage. It's like kind of like a database where you can put up like some kind of like actors needed for such and such, and you would like put in your info, like what you need, and that's how they reached out to me. For the animators themselves, they were actually friends of mine from school. Well, no, they weren't friends of mine at the time, but I kind of put up like help wanted posters up in the animation departments of my school, and like believe it or not, the people who helped me were two juniors, and yeah, they were like really freaking talented, and I was like, wow, I got really lucky. So
did you tell them like which program you wanted to use or what you were familiar with? Did you have any preferences at that point?
Yeah, I was telling them that I was working in Clip Studio because that was the only thing I knew. A lot of them were working in, I believe, like Harmony, Toon Boom, and TV Paint was the other one. And I was like, well, I don't really want to like go through the process of learning a new program because like I'm on a huge time crunch because at that point I was already a senior and the due date was like March, before coronavirus, of course. So I was kind of telling them like, hey, can you just like work in Clip? And they did. So like I ended up getting licenses for them.
Mm-hmm.
So and getting them on board with that stuff. And some other people who helped me on the off time were already using Clip but weren't familiar with it. So I was like guiding them and like, hey, like use clipping layers to do this because it's easier. This is how I use the animation timeline because a lot of them had never used it before. So I was basically guiding them and giving them like a crash course on how to use it as we were working.
That's great. Okay. Yeah, we have like one final question at the end. Do you have any advice for people who would like to get into, for one, storytelling?
Mhm.
Do you have a preferred medium, or like what kind of medium would you suggest to people? Because animating seems like really up there. And how do
Mhm.
you stay motivated to keep
Okay.
animating?
Okay. So for the motivation aspect, I probably am a little weird in this respect, but what kept me motivated personally was that I was really passionate about what I was doing. So they kind of like in school they really emphasize that. So like when you do any project, you have to make sure that you really love what you're doing and you really feel for the story that you're telling because you're gonna be spending a lot of time with it. So you better at least like it. So my story was very personal to me. It was like kind of like my own way. I had never used my art to kind of express my feelings, weirdly enough, because I'm an artist, but it just never happened. So doing this film was me expressing myself and like kind of expressing my grievances with what I was experiencing in my life. So that's what kept me motivated because it was kind of like therapy for me. Not to say that you have to do that with your own stuff, but at least like what you're doing and make sure it's something that you feel really passionate about, while also being creative. Um, Wait, what was the first part of that question? I lost it.
Um, if you were to do storytelling, what format would you recommend for people who are starting out?
Okay. Okay. For me personally, I would just do one-off illustrations. So when I was first starting out, I remember I was a huge Sailor Moon, I am, but like, and when I was younger, I was huge on Sailor Moon, and that's how I kind of broke into the social media sphere for artists. And what I would do is that I was really into environmental storytelling. So what that means is, and it's pretty easy for anybody starting out because it doesn't really cost you more than like a day or two to do, or like a week, depending on your like availability. But what I would do is that I would take like the main, like any characters from Sailor Moon and then like put them in an environment, and then I would set dress. Basically, like for example, I did this one piece where it was like Usagi from Sailor Moon sitting at a window, and then I would put certain items to clue in certain things about her. So like for example, I believe I put like her Sailor Scout uniform kind of strewn out across the floor to like kind of infer that she had just changed out of it, and she was now in her like pajamas looking out into the city after like a long day of like crime fighting or something. So like little things like that you can really be a good way to tell stories like while you're just starting out, and it's a one-off piece, not like a dedicated project. You won't like burn out. And it's like a really cool way to start out because like think of like comic book covers or book covers or like anything that's just a one-off piece that communicates like some kind of a message. That's like a good way to start, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's it.
Oh,
So
okay, cool.
thank you very much. Yeah, we still have a lot of questions, but we're also like 1 minute short of time now. So I
Mhm.
thank you so much for explaining your process for the whole film.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank everyone for coming. Like I was kind of surprised that there's so many people here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luciannys.
Mhm.
We are pretty sure that you have inspired a lot and in
Mhm.
different aspects of the production pipeline, whether it's like storyboarding or making the story, animating. And thank you, Joanna, for selecting the questions. And pretty sure there's a lot of questions that were left over, but this time has ended. We are covered an hour of webinar, but we learned a lot. Thank you so much, Luciannys. So before we go, I would just like to share some last slide with you guys. For more information, learn more about Clip Studio Paint, please visit clipstudio.net/n and graphicsly.com. If you want to watch the webinar again, we'll upload the recording tomorrow probably on our social media on YouTube channel Graphicsly or Celsius Web. And for more information about Luciannys and her projects, please visit her Instagram, Opal Lines, Twitter, and if you follow the bit.ly link, bit.ly/Opal Lines YouTube, you will access to her YouTube channel and you can watch Luciannys short film Check Yes. So with that, thank you so much, Luciannys. Thank you so much, Joanna. And I'll see you guys on our next webinar. So stay tuned and follow our social media. Thank you all attendees. Bye-bye.